Welcome to the webinar on NICHD Data and Specimen Hub Codebook Preparation and Submission. This webinar is geared towards investigators and data managers who plan to share data through DASH. My name is Susan Tenney. I'm from Booz Allen Hamilton, supporting the DASH contract. I am the lead program support. I'm also joined by my colleagues, Alyssa Fujimoto, who is the lead data manager in DASH, and Anya Dabich, who also provides program support. We are also joined by Dr. Rebecca Rosen. She is the NICHD program lead for DASH and is the director for the Office of Data Science and Sharing at NICHD. So in the next 45 minutes, what we'd like to do is to provide an overview of DASH and review the requirements and process for data submission to DASH. Codebook is one of those requirements, and we have recently released a codebook template to help you prepare the codebook and submit to DASH. So we will start off with an overview of the codebook, walk through a demo of how to complete the codebook template using some examples and provide some best practices. We will also briefly go over the online submission process in DASH and provide a demo of the data preparation tool, which is the tool that you will use to submit the data and all associated study documentations, including the codebook to DASH. Finally, we'll close out with some resources for data and codebook submission that are available through DASH. And we have dedicated about 15 minutes for question and answer. So if you wouldn't mind holding off your questions till then, we will open up for the question and answer. But meanwhile, feel free to add to the chat any questions you might have through the course of this webinar. So what is DASH? NICHD established DASH as a centralized resource for researchers to share de-identified data from studies funded by NICHD. You might note that this is de-identified data. That is, all the data submitted to DASH must be de-identified of all 18 HIPAA identifiers. DASH also serves as a portal for requesting biospecimens stored in the NICHD biorepository from selected studies in DASH. So since DASH was launched in August 2015, we have approximately 201 studies currently, and these span about 50 study topics. You see the study topics on the top right side of your screen. This ranges from preconception through pregnancy, through adolescent, and on to women's health. This really represents the broad portfolio of NICHD's mission and the type of research that NICHD conducts. We also have currently 483 data requests in DASH, of which about 100 of them came in just this past year, since June of 2021. And reuse of data that have been obtained from DASH have resulted in 70 data use publications. We also have about 9 studies that offer biospecimens, and the range of biospecimens that are available in DASH is shown in the bottom right side. We have approximately 350,000 specimens currently available through DASH. And you can see the number of biospecimen requests that stands at 11 right now. So what are the benefits of sharing data? Many of you are familiar with all of the benefits from sharing data, but let me enumerate a few and highlight some metrics that we have been capturing in DASH. So first of all, it helps to comply with NIH data sharing policies. You can share the data either associated with a publication or all of the study-related data that you have collected for your study. But it must be in compliance with the informed consent, specified data use limitations, and also in compliance with NIH data access review process that have been established in DASH. Sharing of data also maximizes the reuse of data already collected. So besides pooling the data to perform secondary analysis, we have also noticed that the time to publication is significantly shortened compared to primary publications. So in DASH, we've observed the average time to publication is approximately 1.6 years. Sharing also enhances the scientific value of NICHD studies. For example, one study in DASH has been requested over 110 times in the past 6 years. And we have data requesters from across the globe requesting data from DASH. And as per DASH policy, the original study investigators must be acknowledged in all publications. And then finally, for early stage investigators, they can reuse existing data that has already been collected and jumpstart their careers instead of having to collect data from scratch. So those are some of the benefits. And with that, let me hand it over to Alyssa Fujimoto, who will walk us through the data and codebook submission and the demo.
Thank you, Susan. Hi, everyone. Today I'll talk about the DASH submission requirements, and we're going to talk about it at a high level right now, but there is more details in the appendix slides. So starting off with the institutional certification for sharing, this is an administrative form that documents that the submitting institution must attest to one of the following: that the study was conducted under an IRB determination of exemption or waiver of consent, or the study was conducted as part of an IRB approved protocol, and/or the IRB has reviewed the consent and determined that the data can be shared for secondary research purposes. Or lastly, that the research was conducted with de-identified data that did not require consent. The second element that needs to accompany your submission are the study protocol and any data collection instruments or case report forms that were used in the study. The third element is the de-identification methodology document. This is a document summarizing the identification methods used that as per HIPAA regulations or the safe harbor method were used to transform your data. This safe harbor method is in line with the DASH policy of how the data should be de-identified. The fourth element, of course, is the DASH Codebook. This is the codebook that delineates the variables that are in your study data. And we're going to have a demo of the codebook a little later, and we'll go into detail for that. And lastly, the fifth item is if there are biospecimens available for sharing, a biospecimen catalog provides the high-level metadata of each specimen that's available. And if so, that would also be part of your submission package. Moving then on, we'll talk about submitting to DASH at a high level. So starting with the principal investigator, or DCC, we'll start with part 1, which is preparing study documents and data for submission. We have in the left-hand corner, step 1, which is to gather all the data and documents that you're going to submit to DASH, and then move on to step 2, to de-identify your study data and a biospecimen catalog if applicable. If that is applicable, the same de-identified participant ID code would be found in both the study data as well as the biospecimen catalog. And then moving on to part 2 is the part where we'll start to submit to DASH. So step number 3 is preparing all your files and using the data preparation tool, or DPT, to categorize, annotate, and validate your items, to then move on to step 4, which is to upload and securely submit your study in DASH in an encrypted fashion. When that is done, it moves on to part 3, in which the DASH curation team takes over. So we review your submission to make sure that everything is complete and de-identified. If it is not, we will work with the submitter to tell you what is needed to change in your submission for you to resubmit. And then you would repeat steps 2, 3, and 4 until the submission is complete and de-identified properly. Once that is obtained, we'll move on to step 6, where the DASH team will obtain NICHD sign-off, and this is an administrative step that's done internally, to lead to step 7, which is the final stage where we release the study in DASH for future requesters. So the DASH Codebook has been newly implemented, and this is in line with the new NIH data management and sharing policy that will be effective in January of 2023. The codebook template that we have developed is there to promote variable understanding and meaningful secondary use of the data. We are standardizing variable metadata across submissions and improving the quality assurance to make these variables more discoverable within DASH, as well as promoting terminology and harmonization of these variables across submission. Both the template as well as the codebook user guide are available in our DASH website to be able to download from the Submission Resources tab. And with that, we're going to dive in to show you the actual codebook. This is a codebook that's from DASH. Keep in mind that I have it populated with 3 different examples that I'll go into detail in a second. I want to orient everyone to the different fields of the codebook first. The instructions at the top note that any fields within asterisks are required. So starting with row 2, we'll go through some of these fields to understand what is in the codebook template. So starting with column A, this is a required field where you would say where the variable came from, so the data set name of your submission for that variable. Column B has data collection instrument name or CRF name. So this would be the case report form or CRF where the variable was located. Column C is variable name, and this is the actual name of the variable within the data set, followed by column D, which is the variable label, which is a descriptive label of what that variable represents. If there is additional contextual information that you want to provide for that variable, you would fill that in column E for variable label description. It's optional, as well as any aliases, which are any synonyms or key terms that you want to include about that variable to help provide additional contextual information for those end users. Moving on, the next category is variable type. Within our DASH codebook, there are 3 different variable types of variables to submit to DASH: coded, numeric, and character. Again, we will go through in-depth examples of each of those types of variables. Depending on the variable type, you will fill out certain columns H through L. So for example, if your variable type is coded, you would fill out column H, which is about your variable code list, which is associated with this code list tab, which we'll go into in a bit. If your variable is numeric, you would fill out column I, which is the unit of that numeric variable. And if needed, if your variable unit doesn't exist, you would fill out column J, which is for any other variable units that might not be captured in column I. Columns K and L are used to depict for numeric variables the minimum and the maximum values found within your data. And lastly, column M is variable category, which is associated with this recommended standards tab, and we'll go into detail about selecting each of these different categories. Okay, so starting with a coded variable example, we will start off with race. This race variable is found in, let's say, our demographics data set, which is associated with case report form number 1 for capturing demographics, and the description or the label is the race of the participant. There's no additional information that we want to add for race, so we move on to the rest of the code book and fill out the row, saying that the variable type is coded because each of the values are associated with a different label. So in order to get the code list populated, you would go to the code list tab and populate whatever categories are associated with that variable. So in this case, for race, we have 5 different race categories depicted in the code list. You would populate any code list here first, and then go back to your study variable tab to be able to select the code list name from the dropdown. Because it's a coded variable, again, we do not have to fill out any of the subsequent columns because those have to do with numeric variables and they're grayed out, so we know that we don't have to fill them out. In the last column, for variable category, we go to the recommended standards tab to see which category best pertains to our race variable. For this example, there is a race category, so we would select that one using the dropdown for variable category. For the second example, we're going to talk about a numeric variable. So for example, the numeric variable of vent days might be found in our hospitalization data set, which is case report form number 7. And vent days represented the number of days that a participant was on mechanical ventilation. Additional contextual information that we might want to provide about this variable is that it was positive pressure ventilation, as well as an alias of IPPV for invasive. In terms of the type of variable, again, this is numeric, and because it's numeric, column H is grayed out, but we have to fill out column I, which is the variable unit, in which case this was days. If, again, the unit that you are looking for does not exist in the current list, you would scroll down to the bottom and select Other, and then fill out what Other is in column J. Based on our data, the number of days ranged from 0 to 17 days, and so we depict it here in the minimum and maximum range. And then in terms of the variable category, we would go to our Recommended Standards tab, and we've selected procedures because days for mechanical ventilation pertains to an activity that was performed as part of provision of care. So that's why we selected procedures for that one, because it was the best fit. In terms of our last example, which is a character variable, we have an example of this character variable as adverse event. So for our adverse event description number 1 variable, or AE description 1, this variable came from our adverse events data set, which corresponds to form 15, and the description of that variable is the description of the first adverse event reported. We don't have any additional information we want to include, so we move on to column G, which is to depict that it's a character variable. And the subsequent columns are grayed out because there are no applicable additional information we need to fill out for character variable. So we jump to the end, which is this last column of variable category. Using the Recommended Standards tab, we find that problems is the best category to select since problems depicts information about a condition, event, or issue that is documented. So that is why we've selected problems here. As you go through depicting all the variables in the data to submit to DASH, you'll complete this form and populate it. Keep in mind there is a user guide available on the DASH website to be able to help walk you through the process. And so with that, we are going to now move to show you DASH. And so as you get your data ready and all your documents ready, it helps to have everything organized. So what you might want to do is have an easily accessible location on your computer where you start to store not only this codebooks, but some of your documents. So for example, I have a test submission folder located on my desktop, and it has 2 subfolders within it. My data folder, which has my CSV data set and the SAS version of my data set, as well as a documents folder, which has the 4 required documents to submit to DASH. So that's the codebook, the CRF, case report form, or data collection instruments, my DID methodology document, and my protocol. In addition to creating this submission folder, you also want to create a blank folder separate from your submission folder, again, somewhere easily accessible. This is your workspace folder, which is going to be used for DPT, which we'll get in a demo in a little bit. But it helps to have these 2 things created and organized as you start your submission for DASH. So jumping to DASH, we have the DASH homepage. And so for those of you not familiar, this is the DASH homepage, and there are different tabs up top where you can explore the different data and biospecimens available for request, as well as be able to submit a study. If you are wanting to just explore the site, you do not need an account, and you can see the different resources available. However, if you plan to submit or request resources from DASH, you would need to sign up for an account and be logged in to be able to complete those activities. So in order to be able to submit, you would go to Submit Study here, and then you would start your submission process. This online portion of the submission is used to depict your study, and I have an example of the online submission form here. So this form shows you that on the left-hand side, we've got several tabs of information that you will go through and depict your study. Starting with the study registration tab, this is where you would fill in information about your study, NICHD affiliation, as well as if there's any related studies that you want to call out so that we can provide linkages towards. For the contact information tab, this is where the NICHD point of contact information would be depicted, as well as information about the study PI or co-PI and the Data Coordinating Center or DCC PI. For the policy compliance tab, this is a series of questions to certify that the study was conducted in line with human subjects, regulations, and policies and procedures. Moving on to the study information tab, this is where you will depict information about your study, such as study description, study timeline, which includes study enrollment start and end dates, as well as data collection start and end dates, any keywords or topics, the type of study, funding information, as well as any URLs associated with the study. For the study schema tab, this is where you'll build out a high-level representation of how your study was conducted. You can use main headings and subheadings, as many as needed, to depict the cadence of your study. For the study population tab, here's where you will depict the total number of participants in your study and a brief description of them. This total number is then further broken down by different categories such as sex, life stage, ethnicity, race, and location. For the biospecimen information tab, if there were specimens collected for sharing, you would depict them here and be able to tell us if they were available for secondary use. For data distribution, these are a series of questions to depict the data being submitted and provide additional information for future requesters. So for example, for the first question, if you are submitting all the data to DASH based on your study protocol, you would say yes. Otherwise, if you click no, you would describe what is not being submitted to DASH so that future researchers can know what's been excluded from the package. For the second question, based on your informed consent, if there's additional study-specific approving entity needed for future requests, you would depict that here, such as the steering committee. Otherwise, you would click no. Keep in mind that all of the data requests are reviewed and approved by the DASH Data Access Committee, and there are strict safeguards in place, such as a data use agreement that need to be executed between NICHD as well as the requesting institution. For the third question, if there's any limitations to use the data as per the consent form, you would select yes and depict what those limitations are here. Otherwise, you would select no. For number 4, if the informed consent requires that requesters have IRB approval in addition to the other safeguards and provisions in place for requesters, you would depict it here. Otherwise, you would select no. For number 5, if there's any proprietary data collection instruments that were used, and those are ones that have either costs and or licenses that require their usage, you would depict their information here. Otherwise, you would select no if you did not have any. For number 6, if there's any license coding standards such as SNOMED or MEDRA that were used in your data, you would depict them here. Otherwise, you would select no. And lastly, for the acknowledgement instructions, if there's anything additional that you would like, that the study would like to have to be acknowledged beyond the standard DASH acknowledgement, that language would be inserted here. For the institutional certification tab, this is where you'll upload the signed and completed institutional certification form. This is an internal administrative form that will not be distributed outside of DASH. For the data preparation step, this is where you'll begin to work with DPT. If you do not already have DPT downloaded onto your computer, you would use either of these two buttons down here to download, depending on if you have a Windows computer or a Mac computer. And to be able to, after you download DPT, you will be able to open it up on your computer and work with it either online or offline. And so I'll show you now DPT. So when you start DPT, you will have this landing page. We are currently at version 4.5.1. As we release new versions, you'll be notified if there's a newer version available in DASH to download. DPT has 5 different steps associated with it, as shown on this landing page. The first step has to do with adding your collection to submit to DASH. The second step is to categorize your files. The third step is to generate your templates. The fourth one to validate your templates. And lastly, the fifth step to create your submission files. To begin with DPT, you simply select this Next button, and then you will go to Add Collection. Because we're submitting a new study that doesn't already exist in DASH, we would select this top button. The bottom button is for study updates, that if you would like to add additional items to your study, you can use DPT to do that. Otherwise, we are talking about a new study submission right now, so we'll click Continue. For the study name, you will put the name of your study, but in this case, we're doing a demonstration, so we'll just call it Demo for now. For the data location, you want to browse to that folder where you had all your submission items organized in an easily accessible location. So in this case, we had a test folder on our desktop called Test Submission. In addition to browsing to where your data or your study items are stored, you also want to browse to that blank workspace folder that's separate from your submission folder. So again, we had a blank folder on our desktop that was just called Test Workspace, so we will select that. DPT is going to use that folder to write the annotation templates, which we'll see in a second. So after we've designated where our data are stored in our workspace folder, we're going to click Add Collection. We move then to the second step, which is to categorize the files. So each file that is being submitted to DASH needs to be depicted as either a dataset or a document. So as you go through your folder structure, you will have to classify each of these items again as a dataset or a document. There's an Approve checkbox here that you can use, or you can also use this Approve All button for quick selection. So for our datasets, we are classifying them all as datasets and our documents all as documents. Once you've classified all your items, you click the Next button, and we do not have any biospecimens to submit, so we'll select No, but we'll generate our templates to be able to depict not only our study datasets, but our documents. Clicking this Generate Templates button, you'll get a pop-up where you'll have the options to go to your workspace. So when you click on that, you'll see that DPT has written 2 files into that test workspace folder that was previously blank. Now you have the dataset template and the document template. These files depict the study items that you are submitting to DASH, in which we'll have to provide annotations about. So starting with the dataset template, you simply open it up. And as you can see, it has the 2 datasets that I'm submitting to DASH. To orient to this file, we'll go through some of these fields. So DPT automatically populates column A, which is the file path. You do not need to change anything in this column A. This is purely to orient you to which item needs to be annotated. The columns that you should populate are subsequent ones B onward. So column B is the title or name of that data set, and column C is a description, a longer contextual description of that data set. In column D, for type of data, there's 2 options in which you can say it's individual level data, meaning one row represents a participant, or if it's aggregate summary data. Those are the 2 different types of data. For column E, dataset format, there are several different formats of data sets that are available. If the version of data is not available, you would select Other and then say what Other is in this form, in this column. Moving on to the subsequent columns. Column G has associated keywords that you might want to depict to help future users be able to find your data set. And then columns H and I depict the variable name used to identify the subject or the visit within that data set. And lastly, column J is for you to put in any additional information for future requesters to tell them about that data set that might be important for them to know. So for the purposes of this demonstration, I actually have already pre-populated some of the information that I'm just going to copy and paste here. When I'm done filling out my annotations, I simply save the file and close it. Moving then on to the document template, I will now provide annotations for each of the documents. If you recall, there are 4 different documents that we are submitting to DASH. So again, file path, column A is pre-populated with the documents to annotate, so do not change anything there. Populate columns B onward. So similar to the dataset template, the document template also has a title and description of that document that you are delineating for each row item. For column D for document types, there are several different types such as protocol, data collection instruments. You would simply pick which one that this corresponds to. If your document type is not listed, you would select Other and then fill that out in column E. For the publicly available column, we have for each study in DASH documents that are available on the study overview page that are the required documents to submit to DASH. So that includes the protocol, the codebook, any data collection instruments or case report forms, and lastly, the DID methodology document. If you are annotating either one of those rows, you would select that publicly available equals yes. Otherwise, you would select no. And no would be other documents that you do not want publicly available on that overview page, such as any reports or SAS programming code that might accompany your submission. In order for the end users to actually view these publicly available documents, they do need to be registered users in DASH and be able to learn about your study more before requesting access to the data. And lastly, in column G, if there's any additional information that you would like requesters to know about that document, you would simply put it into column G. So similar to the data set template, I also have annotations already for the document template, which I'm just going to quickly paste in here. And then you're going to save and close. So now that that is complete, you return to DPT and you click on this Annotations Completed button. This will bring you to the 4th step to validate your templates. You simply click on this yellow button to validate your templates, and if everything is successful, you'll get this pop-up that says that the validation was successful and you can move on to the next step. If there are any errors in your annotations, meaning that there is a required field and you're missing information in a certain cell, DPT will produce an error report and depicting where exactly you need to go into your annotations to fix it and then try and revalidate. You'll go through this process until you get this validation success window and you can click OK to move on. For this last step, this is where you would upload your study items securely to DASH. What DPT does is it encrypts and secures these items and transmits them to the DASH team. But to fully complete your submission, you need to return to DASH to go to the very last step. So DPT was to send the items, but now we have to actually fully submit the study. So in the very last step, this is where we would review and submit the study. You can preview your study overview page, which depicts all the information you had inputted from the previous tabs. And if you need to make any corrections to anything that you see in the preview, you can simply close that out and navigate to the tab to make corrections, and then preview to make sure everything is exactly as you would like it. Once you're done confirming that everything looks the way you would like it, you would submit the study to DASH. By submitting the study, it alerts us that the study is ready for our review. If there are any changes needed to your submission, we will contact you and let you know exactly what needs to be changed, as well as provide information about how to resubmit to us. As you're going through your study submission, if you would like to reference any of the resources, we have under this Resources tab, Submission Resources. And so I'm actually going to turn it back to Susan as she's going to talk more about each of these submission resources.
We have a number of resources that are available through DASH. Some of them are general, some of them are specific, and I will highlight a few of them. As you can see in this slide, there are some general DASH resources, specifically the DASH policy, which outlines DASH policies and governance for data submission and request. We also have some frequently asked questions and a DASH tutorial, which is really a step-by-step instruction with some visual screenshots on how to do everything in DASH, including submitting studies. Alyssa covered some of those steps, but you have detailed instructions here in the DASH tutorial. We also have some specific resources. So the first two shown there for DASH Codebook, the template and the user guide will help you complete your template. The user guide actually provides good information about how to complete the template and prepare it for submission. We also have resources for study submission. So the third item there, the study submission worksheet, really provides you an overview of all of the information that you would need to complete the online submission form. This is something that you can download and work offline and gather all of the information in advance of submitting your study to DASH. And we also have the templates, the institutional certification templates for data submission and for biospecimen catalog submission. And the guidance for de-identification for both data and biospecimen catalog is also available in DASH, where we provide, again, a detailed step-by-step instruction on how to de-identify your data. But we would encourage you to actually work with the DASH curators as well as you're working through the de-identification, because there are some nuances for each study that you might want to take into account. And the data preparation tool that Alyssa walked through is also available for download under the DASH resources. And so, as I mentioned earlier, Dr. Rebecca Rosen is our DASH program lead. And if you have any questions at any time with respect to the data submission, codebook preparation, or anything else relating to DASH, please feel free to contact us at support@mail.nih.gov, and our DASH administrator will triage the questions accordingly.